Nevertheless, it's my pleasure now to introduce you to the session on ERP recognition schemes and standards. And I want to go a little bit back in history how it comes that we discuss standards. In 2015, UNIDO, GIZ and the World Bank, we are all organizations which support industrial parks to become more inclusive and more sustainable. And in 2015, we worked as UNIDO, as the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, which has the mandate to promote inclusive and sustainable industrial development under the Global Resource Efficient and Cleaner Production Program. We had one work stream on eco-industrial parks. It was already named eco-industrial parks. Still, there was a plethora of names around. So it was really important that we could come together and agree. We all supported the same exercise to make these industrial areas, these industrial parks, more sustainable, more resilient, more inclusive. And what they have in common is it's planned and developed area for infrastructure development, for industrial activities, and associated commercial and infrastructure services. And what it is a tremendous concentration of economic activity on a small space. We already discussed it's also the ideal breeding ground to promote circular approaches, to promote industrial symbiosis, industrial synergies. And since we're all working with government, the three organizations, we decided we need to have a uniform name. We need to have a brand name. And after long discussions, we came up with this brand name of eco-industrial parks to describe what makes the better performing industrial parks. And since we did not only want to have an agreement that the better performing industrial park can be called an eco-industrial park, we also came up with an international framework which describes what makes the difference between an industrial park and an eco-industrial park. And for me, when I have to present this at a cocktail, a small talk, I always say it boils down to compliance plus. Compliance plus in 4 domains: environmental performance, social performance, management performance, and financial performance. So the first version of this framework was developed in December 2017. We all applied it, we fine-tuned it and came up with the second version in 2021 of the International Framework for Eco-Industrial Park. And applying this framework, you can do an assessment of the performance of an industrial park against this framework. And again, we also came up with a really commonly agreed and accepted definition. And an eco-industrial park is a dedicated area for industrial use at a suitable site that supports sustainability through the integration of social, economic, and environmental quality aspects into siting, planning, management, and operations. And I think it is really, this is the beauty of it. It's companies working together with the support of the management entity, the park management entity. Well, as I mentioned, you can assess each and every industrial park against this international framework, applying the 64 indicators. And the outcome of such an assessment, there are many outcomes, but one of them, I think, which is the most graphic representation, is this spider diagram. If you do such an ERP assessment, it does not only give you the status quo of your park. In this case, it would be the black inner line. But since this is a participatory process which you have to carry out together with the park management entity, you also can identify what are realistically achievable improvements. And this gives you then the next line. For instance, here, this was the Pretoria Industrial Park here in South Africa, which was assessed the first time against the international framework in 2020. And then every year we can do annual assessments. So we agree with the park management and the tenant companies what they want to do to improve their environmental performance, their social performance, their management performance, and their financial performance. And then every year you do a stock-taking exercise. So the blue line here shows us where the park was in 2022. And it also gives you an indication what can be realistically achievable. And I think this is then also for target setting a very important exercise. As you can imagine, when you do this exercise with a park on an annual basis, and if you look at Puchajaba, and you can see how much they have improved, their first question is, dear UNIDO, you've helped us so much with your technical assistance, but I want to have a beautiful certificate to put on the wall of my office to confirm that I have improved my performance. And we had to tell then our partners, sorry, neither of us, neither GIZ, nor UNIDO, nor the World Bank, we are no certifying entities. We cannot give you a formal recognition or certification because it would also be a conflict of interest. On one hand, we provide you with technical assistance and then we say, well done, does not work. And in addition, we don't have the mandate. So the discussion came up that recognition schemes are needed. And there are two options. There can be a national recognition scheme and there can be an international standard or international recognition scheme. And both have different purposes and have different merits. And today we will hear from our panelists about two national initiatives, and our colleagues from the World Bank will present the way forward towards the creation of an international standard for eco-industrial parks. And for us from UNIDO, this is of particular relevance since in the program document for the second phase of the Global Eco-Industrial Park Program, which is supported by Switzerland, we amended it to facilitate standard setting. Because also Switzerland has realized there is a need. The companies ask for, the management entities ask for such a standard against which they can be certified. And just to quickly guide you through the first thoughts, where we stand in this process towards working towards an international standard. In early this year, we were mandated in our program document to work towards a standard, but Switzerland also said, this international framework had been developed by 3 entities. So please seek the partnership of GIZ, seek the partnership of the World Bank to work towards this common goal. So we discussed, and the first discussion led us towards the idea to come up with an ISO standard, and there was agreement that how we could cooperate. GIZ showed interest, and SECO then said, okay, green light, we can go ahead. And then, fortunately, also our third partner came on board. In April 2024, the World Bank then said, yes, we also want to join this effort, but it should be a standard which is hinged on the EDGE certification scheme, which has been developed by the World Bank and the IFC. And right now, we are in the process to see how we can cooperate really in this endeavor to make sure that the provisions, all the provisions of the international framework will be properly mirrored in this international standard and how we can roll this out. And our colleagues from the World Bank will share with us how this will be done, how this standard development process will look like, and what the expected outcome will be of this exercise. And then for us, it will be, we are looking forward really to see how we can ensure also the engagement of our partners in this process to make sure that the voice of the partners we've been working for the last 7 years can be heard. And it will also be important to see how we can support the field testing. So to say, we might have a better version of the international standard, and then we do a field testing. We can do the same thing like for the international framework. We had a first version, and then we fine-tune it, we roll it out, we implement it, and then we gather again and see how it can be improved. But we will hear more from our colleagues from the World Bank about this. And now I would like to ask our 2 panelists who are here with us in the room to come on stage, because they will share with us, first of all, some national initiatives. And Bernd will share with us, Bernd Oellermann from the National Cleaner Production Center here in South Africa, will share with us how standard operating procedures can support the sustainability of industrial parks and industrial areas. As a second speaker, we have with us Angelika. Peña from the Colombian Business Association, and she will share with us, oh, this is a difficult one, how Colombia has embarked on the journey to develop a national standard. Colombia is the first country in the world which has come up with a national standard, and this national standard is really mirroring the 64 indicators. What they have done also, they've introduced like compliance categories. I always call it gold, silver, bronze. There are different names, but different levels of compliance give you also a different certification level. And as our third panelist, who unfortunately cannot be with us in person, is the World Bank, and we have an IFC. We have our colleagues Sinem Demir and Na Yun Shin from the World Bank, and I don't know whether Etienne will also be with us, Etienne Kechichian from the World Bank. They will enlighten us on this EDGE approach. After the 15 minutes inputs by the three panelists, we'll have 45 minutes for questions and answers. And don't run away, because we will pick your brains a little bit later on to see, what thoughts went into the question, national standard versus international standard, what are the pros and the cons. And based on this, we're then looking forward to have a very interactive question and answer session. Without further ado, Bernd, I would like to ask you to come on stage to share with us the standard operating procedures which have been implemented here in South Africa.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian. I have my own timer, but I did ask Christian to time for me as well. Okay, right, let's just jump right in. So maybe before I talk about standard operating procedures, so the nice thing about this body of work is it informs the work in South Africa on a national ERP standard as well. That work has taken a bit longer, and maybe we'll get to talk about that a bit later, simply because we want to make sure that there's alignment between what has already been happening internationally and what we are planning for South Africa. Now, if you talk about standard operating procedures or operating systems for an industrial space, there's a global context. I'm not going to stand still on this slide. This is just to trigger your thinking about what are the macroeconomic global factors generically that impact on an industrial space. Okay, so just for you to have a look at that. I can pick one or two. I mean, the just transition, the geopolitical landscape, if you want to talk politics, there's a whole long conversation you can have about that. And the impact on supply chains directly affects industry, of course. But I don't want to stand still there. If you talk about a standard operating procedure, and I'll share a particular example or maybe two with you later if there's time, you need to look at what makes up an industrial space. And if you look at what are those things, you suddenly realize that you're talking about a system that consists of multiple components. And if I highlight the first one is, and this has come out in a number of the presentations already, there's the whole aspect of policy, institutional and operational alignment, reporting, regulatory requirements, all of those things. So I'm grouping a whole huge body of work into one little sentence. Okay, so don't underestimate that one little sentence, right? It goes as far as carbon tax and carbon footprints and ESG reporting, and just on some of those acronyms, EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, EPC, Energy Performance Certificates in South Africa that are required. The NDCs for South Africa under the Paris Agreement, that's the nationally determined contributions. Okay, so you need to record that somewhere. Government doesn't produce things, it's industry, but industry needs to record so that government can report. Okay, so it's important to understand that whole interchange. The next aspect that's crucial, and that's also a critical pillar in the ERP approach, is of course governance. Okay, the operation of an industrial space. Here you are looking at mechanisms, systems, frameworks that enable you to manage that space efficiently, effectively, okay, sufficiently, difference between efficiency and sufficiency. I don't know how many people know this, especially after lunch. Okay, so I'm not going to ask you to please define that. Okay, but coordination, okay, collaboration, all these really key aspects that need to be played at a governance, at an operational level in an industrial space. Okay, if we take it further, to enable that happening, you need systems and processes. These are not just paper-based or a particular procurement process. Sometimes they are IT-based systems. Okay? So what are those things and how do you address them? And what are the kind of procedures you need to put in place so that people follow them? Because, I mean, what's the point of having a system and nobody does what you are wanting to do through the system? The system is supposed to make it easier. Okay, not more difficult like some people like to do. They slap a whole system on top of something just so that you can't do anything, right? So the systems are important. Infrastructure. Okay, there's been a lot of conversation about energy and water and the waste economy. But there's more in terms of bulk infrastructure, okay? Transport systems, okay? IT infrastructure. That is a critical component for which you need SOPs, standard operating procedures. Supply and SME development, or some people say SMME in South Africa, we use that term. Okay, small, medium, and micro enterprise development. Okay, if you're not intentional about that, it does not happen. This is a very important message. And that's why we have SOPs as well. One has to be intentional for it to change. You can't just say something, which politicians like doing. Sorry, any politicians in the audience, you can come and fight with me afterwards, okay? But you can't just say something and think out of magic and thin air, things suddenly start happening, okay? If you look at research, development, and innovation, if you look at industrial spaces all over the world that are the most successful, they all have a component of R&D and innovation present. Pre-1994 in South Africa, we had a strong relationship between industry and the R&D sector. We no longer have that. Why is this? Okay? So if you want to improve how industry competes and how we present ourselves in the offering we provide, we need to look at those aspects. Okay? Sustainability, crucial. Okay? I just spoke about the global context. But you need to bring it down much closer to an industrial park. All right? If you look at shared services, an industrial space is not only a property that's managed. Okay? So you're not talking about property management. You're talking about value-added services and all kinds of other things that make up the value offering of that industrial space. And too many industrial space operators in South Africa, whether they're public or private, think it's a cash cow. Number one, big mistake, it's not. Okay? Number two, it's just about property. No, it's not. Okay? So we need to change our mindset. Capitalization, financing, and related support. This is a crucial component of an industrial space. An industrial space has a normal life cycle. So you need to give it food and water and all kinds of other things to grow. How do you do that? Financing is a critical component. Christoph Kausch this morning spoke about that. Okay? Investment promotion, marketing, and branding, very close aligned to that. So if you do not have an investment promotion or branding or marketing function in your industrial space, you're losing out. Because you will not attract companies just by, happenstance. Okay, you need to be intentional about these things. Two more. Okay, information sharing, awareness raising, advocacy, and knowledge management. Too many people completely miss the fact of knowledge management. Okay, I remember that in the 90s, knowledge management was a huge thing. Nowadays, people hardly talk about it. We assume it's there, but it's not. Okay, so you need to have processes, standard operating procedures, in place to make sure that that takes place. And the last one, of course, again, something that we miss very often, is quality management, quality control, quality assurance. Right? Not just for the companies and supporting the companies, but for the space itself. So these are crucial components. Some challenges for industrial spaces in South Africa. I'm not going to stand still on this. Okay? But this does inform the kind of actions we have in South Africa. Okay, so that's just for you to take a look at. Some of the other countries present here might relate to some of these aspects. Okay? I know this is a very busy slide. This was just to shake you awake after lunch so that you don't fall asleep completely. Okay, because if there's too much text, you fall asleep, and if there's too much of this, you also fall asleep, but at least now I'm waking you up again. Okay, so there are a number of approaches that are required in an industrial space to actually move it forward. So I've highlighted the social component, the environmental component, the economic component, but there's all these others in the system that you need to address. And the challenge we often have, and this for me is the key point here, the challenge we often have is that the existing system we have in operation, not just in South Africa, all over the world, is linear, still in the 21st century. Okay? So people are not able to use a systems approach to address something that is actually a very complex system. And so we fail. Because you cannot address a system just by looking at one component. And some of you might argue, well, how do you do this? Well, there are people out here, and there's some people in this audience that have the ability to see that system in all of its components. You need to leverage the ability and the talent of those people. Because without that ability, you will continue to fail. And this is, in South Africa, one of the reasons why we're failing. Because people still think, well, we can tackle only one thing. No, it doesn't work like that. Okay? Why are SOPs needed? This is an important question. So many people will say, well, we have all these other things we're doing. Why do I need to draw up documents and process and all kinds of things, to do whatever it is that I'm doing? So just to give you a bit of context of why this is important. Okay, so again, I don't want to stand still on this. I want to get to the last meaty part of the presentation. Okay, so if I move on, of course, my brief was also to talk about resilience and sustainability. So it's interesting that in our current time, the world and the planet and humanity is in, both these concepts are extremely important. Unfortunately, very misunderstood. Okay? Again, a number of people and organizations use the term resilience and sustainability for certain political expediency or profit. It's not what it should be about. Okay? So we can create a win-win situation. So I just shared that with you so that you have a bit of perspective on that. Now, if you develop an SOP or a set of SOPs and documents and a toolbox that you can use, how do you approach this? Well, I'm suggesting a very simple SOP framework based on the Plan, Do, Check, Act methodology. Okay, so you start off with where are you at as an industrial space, okay, or as an entity operating in that space, or as a government agency supporting it. You start where you're at right now. What's the status? What do we have? What don't we have? Okay, so that leads to your analysis phase. Okay, so in that analysis phase, you know that there are certain things missing. Why? Because you're failing at certain things. Simple example. Many institutions do not have a full-blown marketing plan. Because they think, well, it's just normal business development. I just go and find companies and, I just do it. And then they're surprised if 10 years down the line, actually nothing has happened. So you need to step back where you're not making progress on some of your targets. Ask the question, but what is missing? Okay? So that's part of this conversation. The next step is looking at sourcing and developing solutions. And I'm starting to run out of time here. Okay? And implementing those and then reviewing and refining. Okay? The SOP response in South Africa, we started off, the very first SOP we developed was when I was still in the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And that was with great friends of mine now. We weren't friends back then, Faith. Okay, but we became huge friends because of the work that we were doing together, and also now with UNIDO. Okay, and we started working on what is called a South African Water Stewardship Guide for Industrial Spaces. I want to take you there. So this is just a bit of context to give you that. So I want to move on. Sorry, there we go. So the water stewardship approach for industrial spaces in South Africa was our very first process exercise to try and get to an SOP. Why? Apart from electricity, water in South Africa is the second biggest issue. We're one of the most water scarce countries in the world. And if we do not address water early enough, it's going to be way too late for us to try and reactively address it. You can't address water afterwards. Okay? Sorry, it just doesn't work. Okay? So we picked water and we sat down with GIZ and we went through a whole process to identify, well, what are these critical things that we need? I just want to make sure, no, my slide is not cut off. It's cut off on my screen here. I'm glad it's not cut off up there. Okay? So we identified where industrial spaces are vulnerable. All right? And then we looked at why is water stewardship. Now, you might not know this. Water stewardship is not new. Okay? There's something called an Alliance for Water Stewardship, for example. Okay? Yes. 1 minute. Yeah, you see now he's pulling my trick on me. Okay? But he's absolutely correct. I've got 1 minute left. So, why is water stewardship important? And what I tried to introduce was the simple stewardship concepts in building SOPs in industrial spaces. I just have 2 more slides I want to share with you. Then the water stewardship guide, this is how it's being put together just for you. You will get the slides afterwards, so don't stress too much. Okay? And you can see how it's structured. So it gives you a process, stepwise, method that you can follow to ensure that your industrial space manages its water according to stewardship principles. And then it's broken down into a number of phases, but 4 primary phases, which I've broken down here for you. Okay, so there's a lot more. There are actually some of these outside on, I think, the GIZ stand, Faith, if I'm not mistaken. I'm looking at you, but yes, okay, yeah, exactly. Okay, so there are some in paper-based form if you want those, but they're also available electronically and on our ERP portal, which I'm not going to talk much about yet, but I'll say a bit about that later. And with that, I have one other example, but I don't want to get into the master planning guide. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernd, and thank you very much for enlightening us on how South Africa has tackled these standard operating procedures to make sure that all these parks engaged in following the goals of becoming more sustainable have a common pathway to do this and can be measured against a common yardstick. Next, our colleague from Colombia, Angelica Peña, from the Colombian Business Association, will share with us why Colombia embarked on this process to develop a national standard, how Colombia handled this task to develop a national standard. And I think it is really important also that this work which has been done in Colombia to mirror the international framework in a national standard, which was enacted last year in September, has really embarked on these 64 indicators which were jointly developed by GIZ, UNIDO and the World Bank in the international framework, and how they've come up with this tiered approach to give parks the possibility to become certified to different compliance levels. And this standard, the consultant who worked with our colleagues from the World Bank and IFC has also considered this to be a very good starting point for the development of an international standard. So without further ado, Angelica, the floor is yours. Please share with us this amazing experience from Colombia.
Thank you so much. Christian, are you all listening me properly? Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to address you this afternoon here in Pretoria, very far from home, but so exciting and full of energy and delicious food. And speaking about delicious food, I know that speaking after lunch is always difficult. My colleagues have been talking about very fancy stuff like finance, circular economy, right? Chemistry, industrial symbiosis, social performance, even Vanessa. She's so great. She managed to bring some nostalgia, right, about younger and nicer times and how she addressed this guy, you know, the Uber driver. And then I thought people my age, which I'm way older than Vanessa, we take that Uber time to catch up on things like, I don't know, parents' chats. Difficult subject, but let's not get into that. That's not cool. Anyway, very briefly, you already know what it's an eco-industrial park, but I want to give you some ideas of how things are going on in Colombia. Things are doing great. We have been talking about competitive ecosystems, and even in the Organization for the Americas, we have embraced that term because we want to refer to our parks, to our free trade zones as competitive ecosystems, right? So we also see the free trade zones and the parks as an instrument for job creation and the attraction of investments, not only foreign investments, but also local investments. That's important for us. We have been progressing pretty well with the program, with UNIDO. Our free trade zone have been having like a very good compliance numbers, and again, we have some impacts that my association has been measuring in renewable energy and the environmental policy. No, we ask them, have you got an environmental policy? Yes, they do. Social responsibility, also in the social aspect of the parks, which we already addressed in the previous session. I wanted to show you that in Colombia, we have very vulnerable areas, right? And it means due to economic, social, and also political issues, but they're employing between 25 and 70% of the population in those areas. And that is very important, and the 90% of the companies in Colombian free trade zones are small, medium enterprise. Okay, so now let's talk about this certification. Colombia has an Institute of Technical Standards that is a private institution which has the authority, again, it's private, to announce certain practices as complying with the international standards. We have all sorts of certifications, and then with our friends from UNIDO in Colombia, there was this project of having the Colombian standard for eco-industrial parks. So, this is the whole information about Econtech, that's the organization. They have these committees. So let's talk about how it started and how it developed. It started again by the initiative of UNIDO, and then in this organization, they made a group. Who was in that group? Of course, Colombian government, some representatives, you know, from the environment ministry, the trade and industry ministry, but also the academy. You know, we had PhDs, like professors, people very much into environmental and sustainability policies. We have, of course, UNIDO there, and also the private sector, the companies. So it was a very, very diverse group of people just joined by the same subject, which was the eco-industrial parks certification. This is part of what, again, the UNIDO project has called the virtuous triangle in Colombia. I'm going to refer to this before going any further. And the thing is that we have the community of practice, right? And then the other three elements of this triangle are the technical standards, which is what we're addressing right now, the industrial parks law, which I have a very good news for all of you, and it's that a group of congressmen and women have presented to the Colombian Congress a law regarding eco-industrial parks. Why a law? Because what we want is to have a policy that goes beyond any government, any political stand, any ideology even. We want this to be like a really strong policy and to last for very years, at least. So that's very important for that. And also, part of this law is, and this is very interesting, that it was signed, it was submitted by all parties, left-wing parties, right-wing parties. So this gives the idea of a reason for unity in the country even. So from the political standpoint and also from the technical of course, what we care, which is the program, I think that's very important. And then the project, and this is very interesting, is also part of what we call the National Development Program. That is a program that every government issues at the beginning, right, of the period, and it gives you like the compass, right, of the Colombian policy in many different aspects, and the eco-industrial parks are part of it. And that's very important. And also the policy for reindustrialization, which some of you addressed yesterday, I believe. So we also have that sort of policy. Okay, so let's go back to the technical standard. How did it work, right? I want to talk a bit about the process. We wanted to be aligned with the SDGs objectives, of course. We have been talking about that for the last 2 days. And important things to put on the table, like again, Vanessa talked about that, gender equality. That is a subject that for some companies in Colombia, for the private sector, were embracing it, but it's an uncomfortable conversation. It is. So again, in the middle of this discussion of the eco-industrial parks, there were some questions like, why are we setting standards for gender equality? What does it have to do with the eco-industrial parks, right? And then you have to go like from the beginning of the conversation and why is that an important part of, I mean, that's important for the social component of the program. Economic development for communities, that's very sensitive for us. Energy, of course, one of the main issues here as well. Economic growth, local employment, decent work, rails, optimizing processes, producing less waste, all that conversation, and I have highlighted those that were like very, very important during the, I'm going to call it the negotiation progress, or process, I'm sorry. And why is that? I don't want to go over the criteria, you already know that. But again, why I refer to that as a negotiation? Because again, we had a unique goal, which is the development of the eco-industrial parks, but from a very different perspectives. The Colombian government right now has a very strong agenda on sustainability, which is great, but also it represents from the private sector some difficulties in how to understand the sustainability. How do we manage energy sources? You know, we still have important energy resources like oil, gas. Again, it's speaking about a transition to other kind of energies is desirable. We are willing to do that, but in which terms? In how? What is the time framework, and etc. Again, in the administrative aspects, and then there was a very interesting conversation about how far should the administrator or the manager of the park go with the companies already installed. You know, what is the scope of those responsibilities? And it was also a very important conversation in the social aspects, of course, decent work, social, again, gender, that was quite a thing. These are some of the components of the technical standard, but since I only have a few more minutes, I want to talk about the certification, but before that, the methodology. So, we had this group, and it has a president, which was myself. Ta-da! That you are supposed to clap or do something. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Lovely. And what was my role in this negotiation? Of course, I was representing free trade zones. That's what Andy pays me for. So my paycheck was involved on that, which is not a minor thing, but also trying to translate different interests. And one of my first recommendations, if you are willing to go into these technical standards, is that, like, have somebody who is willing and who is capable of understanding the different interests, what each stakeholder wants from the technical standard, and then try to get to the minimum understanding for all of those interests. Of course, some administrative stuff and managing timing and that sort of thing, which is not irrelevant. Again, in these sort of discussions, it took us hours, right? We had like 2-hour and 4-hour meetings, and it could be pretty difficult. Secondly, and I think, again, that was important from Econtech and also from the work done by UNIDO, and it was like having the material prepared. I know this sounds like, of course you have everything prepared, but not all the time, and not in every negotiation. So the standards, the criteria, they were very well written. They were very simple in the sense of easy to understand, even for people that are not experts in sustainability, like myself. But it gave us a common language, so we could go further in the discussion and in the criteria. Then there was also another topic, and it's what are the different levels? You see, if you go, we had three. We had 3 levels, which is transition, advanced, and expert. And there were very interesting questions about what is that? What does it mean? You know, so we had to give it a percentage for each of them, like the compliance percentage, let's say, if I'm trying to be like clear here. But then from the private sector, there was a huge concern, and it's like every park, every free trade zone is very different from the others. It's going to be very difficult to measure us with the same standards. And it depends on the geographical location. It's not the same being on the Pacific coast or the Caribbean or in the middle of the country. Then what is the financing? We have addressed that during these 2 days, and we are clear that without money, this is not going to be possible. So for some of those parks, the free trade zones, the question was, we had very different budgets. It's not going to be fair for somebody who is working with, I'm going to say, whatever, $1,000 and the other park that has 1 million and are doing their best with those budgets. How are they going to be measured under these standards? So it was one of the main issues that took us a lot of time, but at the end of the day, the percentages helped, you know, in this negotiation to be just applied. The certification, finally. According to Econtech methodology, I'm referring to the private entity, in order to be certified, you need to have an audit from a third party, from somebody who is just an expert on the subject and understands all the methodology and the criteria. We haven't got there yet. We are in the process of having it. And why is this also important? I'm speaking about the certification. Because for the companies installed in a free trade zone or in a park, they have a business reasoning, and that's okay. That's why they are meant to do, right? So they want to get to, especially in markets like the European one, that is already reviewing how sustainable is the whole supply chain. And also in Europe, they have this new measure that is voluntary now, but in a few years is going to be mandatory. And it's about the company abroad needs to certify that they have been producing the good or the services in a sustainable manner. If they don't, they are going to be taxed. And when you are taxed, you just punch your finances, right? So this has a strong business logic. So some conclusions were, I don't need to go again in the importance of the eco-industrial parks, but then again, the compliance levels, I will underline that like one of the most important aspects of this process, and the gradual transition. That was also quite a discussion. The private sector, again, we need to go gradual. We need to take step by step. I remember that the representatives from the academy and also the government, they were very keen on going very, very, very fast, and show results in a couple of years. That from the private sector is just not possible. You need to go step by step. And then what's coming? I already told you about the certification. We, from the private sector, are willing very much to see the results. You see, we want to apply surveys. We want to go through this process with the Colombian free trade zones, and of course encourage them, but also have numbers and figures to get measured. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Angelica. I think this was for us also as UNIDO a very interesting exercise. This was the first time we could support such a process. It was mentioned UNIDO built the standard. It's not true. All we can do is we can develop a draft. We can share this draft with stakeholders. We can prepare a draft bill together with partners, and then somebody needs to take it and move it through the government system. And again, we can come in support. We've been requested, for instance, by the Congress in Colombia that we can share with those congressistas who are not yet fully on board what is the benefit of becoming an eco-industrial park. And it will be my pleasure to speak in front of Congress in 2 weeks on this topic. But again, we are not the ones who develop these things. We can prepare a draft together with stakeholders, and then the respective stakeholders who have the mandate need to carry it through. And I think it was extremely important also to see how the private sector has reacted towards this. They wanted to defend their turfs, and I think it's right. But still, we need to be careful when it comes to a standard setting process, particularly if it's an international standard. If you set the threshold too low, what is the value of a standard? If it's too easy to be obtained, if it's too high, it might deter people from really wanting to pursue such a standard. So these are all discussions which are really important when you think about, and most probably for me, I know I'll be involved once in a lifetime in such a process. It's not your common, your daily duty and your daily bread on which you work. And in this context now, I'm really looking forward to hear from our colleagues from World Bank and IFC. I don't know who will be enlighten us with your insights on how the EDGE approach can be used for the development of an international standard for eco-industrial parks. Sinem, Nayun, or Etienne, who is online with us? All good. I shout if I need something. If something doesn't go well, I'll let you hear.
Okay, sure. So just to be on the safe side, I turned off my camera. later. And here are 3 key messages that I'd like to share throughout my presentation. First, from a global perspective, the demand for EIPs is increasing really rapidly. And second point is that the World Bank has provided both technical and financial support to government and industrial park operators and mobilize private capital to the extent possible. Third point is that the World Bank is developing, as Christian mentioned, the global EIP standards and voluntary certification system to incentivize industrial parks to become EIPs. These are the 3 key messages that you need to remember from all the slides that I will be presenting. Let's see, the next slide. Okay, Angelica very nicely mentioned, as she presented, the zones are often used by policymakers and governments to drive the economic growth in countries. And the number of zones has increased rapidly over the few decades. But the number of self-declared EIPs, sort of the industrial parks with green and sustainable infrastructures in various ways, increased by 4 times between the late 1990s and 2020, according to our. And this increasing demand for EIPs reflect changing market trends that give higher premiums to greener products and sustainability products, and also changes in market policies, including climate and green industrial policies and sustainability standards. So Angelica, I think, mentioned also the EU CBAM and also EU CSDD corporate sustainability due diligence law that was just passed earlier this year in the EU. So some of these, changes in the policies also drive the interest and requests to become EIPs. So in this changing market environment and policy context, what our client governments and industrial park operators want is to really differentiate themselves from others by increasing their sustainability performance and really to communicate their performance, improved performance, and to be recognized as such. So we're getting a lot of and consistent demand and requests for support and recognition of their efforts to operate industrial parks more sustainably. Christian mentioned that the World Bank, UNIDO, GIZ, the 3 organizations have developed the International EIP Framework together back in 2017, and which was also updated in 2021. This defines the EIPs in 4 different performance categories: park management, environmental, and social, economic, as you all know. And it has quite a number of indicators and performance requirements. I will talk about later session how we are going to mirror this indicators into the international certification system. In addition, we also publish various knowledge products to really provide practitioners some guidance, practical guidance on how to implement this EIP framework. And some of these, work include, for instance, circular economy in industrial parks, which lays out various technologies, business models, enabling environment to support the development of EIP. There's also resilient industries framework, which is now integrated into the second version of the international EIP framework, that really helps improve the climate resilience of the industrial parks and the businesses. And some of the handbook to guide the practitioners on how to implement the EIP framework. In addition, we also provided financial support to many client countries, including Bangladesh and Turkey and others. Just to give you an example from in Turkey, we are providing a 300 million loan to support infrastructure development that enhances sustainability, competitiveness, and efficiency of various organized industrial zones in the country. And we also help develop the Green OIZ framework at the national level, leveraging the OIZ implementation regulation. Also, interestingly, we're providing technical assistance and capacity building to develop the right institutional to implement the national Green OIZ framework. And this is a very important piece of the whole program. So the expected results are very exciting. We're expecting, for instance, to save 18,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually from these kind of investments. And the financing part is very important, as Angelica mentioned. It's a concern to many zones and also the businesses operating inside the industrial parks. And so as we provide some financial support to client governments and industrial parks, we are also exploring various innovative financing instruments and models. And as an example, we are collaborating with IFC to explore the link with EIPs and sustainable finance products, sustainable finance instruments. And I borrowed this slide from my colleague from IFC who work on sustainable finance instruments, who presented earlier this today or earlier during the conference, who explained this green loans, blue loans, and sustainability linked loans. And there are a lot of opportunities that can be unlocked by linking the sustainable finance products with the EIP investments. Let me give you an example from China. For instance, the People's Bank of China published a catalog listing of various green infrastructure investment projects that can issue the green bond. And a lot of them are related to the eco-industrial park investments. So this already gives you some example, an international example, how the EIPs and sustainable finance products that are out there that are increasing huge in terms of market share, it can be linked together. So based on all these work and experience, we have come to conclusion now it's time to develop the international certification, by translating the international EIP framework into the global standard. And as Krista mentioned earlier, we have been communicating together and what's the best way to really develop this standard or certification system. And we're still working on this and working the progress. But as we develop this EIP certification, there are a few key principles that we are trying to keep in mind. First, that the focus on industrial park management is very important. The industrial park level is a good level at which the certification can happen. Second, we need to establish a minimum threshold required to achieve certification. So there are many performance indicators and requirements, KPIs, that could be set. However, also streamlining and simplification of the standard and certification system is also very important to maintain the entire ecosystem. Also, thirdly, the continual improvement approach is very important. We adopted this approach to the international EIP framework, but this approach applies to the certification as well. So the industrial parks need to continuously improve to maintain their own certification. Fourthly, also as Krista mentioned, we're trying to leverage the IFC experience in developing and implementing voluntary standards such as EDGE and Building Resilience Index, APEX, and other certification systems. I think somebody is speaking, so I can hear their voices.
Somebody is on the line.
You could unmute them.
And Nayun, I just used this to tell you we have 5 minutes left, but you will get extra minutes till we have sorted the technical glitch. Are you still with us, Nayun? You have muted the wrong person, it seems. You can try it with me. The cake. Hello?
Apologies, I'm trying to get her back.
Go to people. Go to people. Wait, in people? My goodness.
Are you working on the issue in the back?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
She has muted herself. We are asking her to unmute herself, so let's be patient with her.
Nayun, can you unmute yourself? Is this possible?
She's on mute. You're back online?
Well, if you can hear Nayun clearly, we cannot hear her. That's the problem.
You cannot hear me?
Now you're back. Hooray!
Okay. Well, there seems to be a little bit of for that. I don't know where my voice wasn't heard, but I did hear some echoes.
We have an echo now.
But I will go ahead in the interest of time, if that's okay.
You have 5 minutes left, Nayun. We are generous.
Okay, so let me go. Oh, thank you so much. I will go on to the next slide because next slides are more important. So here is the global map of the World Bank EIP projects, including the countries where the certification system will be piloted. And there are many, and I'm sure that I've been listening to the earlier sessions. Seems to be a lot of industrial parks that are already making a lot of commitments to become EIP. So hopefully we'll engage all of these industrial parks and interested countries in our next phase of the certification program. Just to brief you on the activities that we have been doing on the global EIP certification program. So this global EIP certification program has been launched based on extensive market research and gap analysis that we have conducted. We reviewed various existing standards, ISOs, green Apex cities, and green building certification and all. We've also country-level diagnostics conducted by us, but also by UNIDO and GIZ, including the Colombia one. So it was very helpful to navigate what is commonalities, what are the differences. But what arose from this market research was that the industrial park is there is an opportunity for industrial park level certification. And this is a very unique standard that we need to develop. And so based on this market research finding, we're now developing a draft standard for EIP certification, which is a tool, a benchmark for industrial parks to measure, monitor, and compare, and also communicate their performance with other peers. And we'll be piloting the draft standard in selected countries and industrial parks. We are already having some discussion with Dominican Republic, Mexico, and Morocco, and we'll collect feedback from these pilot participants, which will be also integrated into the standards and also the global strategy for implementation. This global strategy and also government protocol for the EIP certification standards are very important, as some challenges may arise during the actual rollout and implementation process. So we're trying to be very cautious and careful about outlining also the roles and responsibilities and other things. Also, the stakeholder consultation is a very important piece of the certification system and process. Basically, there are two levels of stakeholder consultation happening, one at the global level, the other at the local level. The one at the global level, World Bank Group is a main facilitator, and we are inviting the UNIDO, GIZ, and SECO as main partners of the EIP framework. And the three organizations, World Bank, UNIDO, GIZ, are serving as a consultative group during the rollout of the certification by IFC. So we'll be doing updating the EIP framework, also supporting implementation at the park level, also trying to develop some policies and financial instruments together, hopefully. And during the local stakeholders, for the local stakeholders during the pilot, as I mentioned, and we're already involving 3 countries, and we're talking to the industrial park associations and zone authorities and collecting feedback, which will be integrated into the draft standards. So basically, in a nutshell, the expected result is the beta version of the global EIP certification coming up in hopefully 1 year time frame. And IFC will be a main coordinator of the certification system. We will also bring private certified country-level auditors to assess and verify the performance of the industrial parks. So in a nutshell, the World Bank has provided various support to scale up EIPs over the past decades, and now translating the EIP framework, international framework, into the global EIP certification program. The certification program really aims to standardize the EIP program, create an incentive mechanism for industrial parks across the globe to become more sustainable, and thirdly, improve credibility and compatibility of the EIPs through an enhanced monitoring and evaluation system. So we hope to expand this engagement in the near future, and so please contact us if you're interested. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nayun, and sorry for the technical glitches for which we assume full responsibility. But we gave you then the extra time. And I think this was another enlightening presentation which showed us how we can move on from responding to the request coming from the park management entities. They all say, and we have received it all over, the same request. In Indonesia, in Vietnam, big parks with 4,500 hectares, they've considered to be certified against an international standard an additional value proposition for them. They said, well, we welcome this. We would like to have this. It will help us to attract better tenants. We are high-level parks. We are not those parks who run after the quick dollar, the quick turnover. We want to come eco-industrial parks in the true sense, and we would welcome to be certified against an international standard. I would like to bring you back to what I've said, that we have received the requests from our partner countries, like Colombia. They've decided it's great if there will be an international standard, but our national development process now also needs to be informed by national standards in the meantime, to develop an international standard with the value proposition by the World Bank Group and by IFC to develop this standard until the end of next year. We have a very ambitious proposal. And again, this is for us also one of the main reasons why we think it makes really sense to adopt this approach. An ISO standard might take much longer. An ISO standard, to develop it, to have it endorsed by the ISO committee, takes at least 4 years. So we want to keep the momentum of the current process, and therefore we really look forward to the outcomes of this process. But to lead us back a little bit to what do you think is easier to be achieved, a national standard, an international standard? Because we did, when we developed the phase 2 of the GIP program document together with our Swiss partners, we were asked all these questions. Does it make sense to have a national standard? Does it make sense, should we go for an international standard? And I would like to guide you through a few key questions. And this is an interactive exercise where if you scan this beautiful thing, you will be led to a Mentimeter exercise. And then you can vote to certain questions which we will present you, just to make the next session, the question and answer session, a little bit more interactive. Where do you see the benefits of a national standard? Where do you see the benefits of an international standard? And raise your hands, please, if you have all managed to connect to this Mentimeter exercise, because then we can go from the PowerPoint to another presentation. Has everybody managed? Anybody who still needs time, shout. Otherwise, we will switch. No, I see phones still coming up. It's like in church. If you have any arguments to be brought forward, do it now, or be silent forever. Are we all good? Anyone still needs time to get to the Mentimeter exercise? Nisa, then please switch to the Mentimeter exercise. And these were really the questions which we explored together with experts in the field. We spoke with the Swiss Normatic Association, the Schweizer Normenverband, and the experts working with them, saying, what is the better match for the task at hand to make sure that we can have a standard for eco-industrial park? Does it make sense to invest the funds Switzerland can provide into development of national standards, or shall we go for an international standard? Nisa, first one. And you can opt on your phones. And the question is, which option do you think offers a more favorable standard development timeline? So in other words, what do you think can be done faster? To develop a national standard or to develop an international standard? Okay, Nisa, apparently there is a glitch with the Mentimeter. Okay. Can we get this working, Nisa, or not? Okay, I think then let's do it interactively. We keep the questions. Who thinks it is faster to develop a national standard? Raise your hand. Faster than to develop a national compared to an international standard? Raise your hands. And who thinks it's faster to develop an international standard? And I must disappoint the last hands. The information we got is yes, and Colombia has shown it to us. This process could be completed in a year to develop a national standard if you have dedicated stakeholders. To develop an international standard takes longer because this process with the World Bank is already also going on. So in general, it takes longer to develop an international standard. So the next question, let's just go through them now manually. Yeah. What do you think, which standard can be more widely acknowledged and valued by stakeholders? And the stakeholders, these are governments, these are industries, these are markets, and the general value chain. So which one do you think, who thinks a national standard can be more widely acknowledged? Raise your hand, please.
National, you said?
A national, yes. And who thinks an international can be more widely acknowledged? And in this case, I must disappoint the first hands. Well, this is not my opinion. This is the opinion of experts who worked on a consultancy on this field. And their feedback was also that an international, while a national standard can be recognized in the country and adopted in the country very quickly, but the wider recognition, the wider acknowledgement, and the wider valuing of such a standard is bigger if you have an international standard. Next one, Nisa. So if you compare the potential adoption by EIP managers, which option do you think appears more promising? Who thinks a national standard is more promising? Or raise your hand, please. And who thinks that an international standard is more promising to be adopted? And you're all right. It depends on the purpose. A national standard, as it is the case in Colombia, can be linked to certain tax benefits, which per se can only be national. So depending on what goes along with this standardization, it can be adopted and can be taken up very quickly. On the other hand, an international standard, this is like, why do companies go through the process to become ISO certified or certified to any other standard scheme internationally? Because they see an additional value proposition. They want to be recognized. They want to be distinct from the general service providers. So both answers are right. It depends on the context. Nisa, which options demonstrate greater potential for upscaling across multiple countries? So if you have, what do you think is easier, that you have a national standard which is developed in one country and then scaled up towards an international standard, or that an international standard is developed and then adopted by a wider range of countries? Who believes in option 1? Who believes in option 2? In this case, also the independent experts support the second set of hands. And the last criterion is, which options offers a more favorable certification cost? To be certified against the standard always requires that the person, the entity who wants to be certified, has to reach out. Angelica has shared with us how this is envisaged to happen in Colombia. But somebody has to show the initiative to say, I or my entity, we want to be certified. And then they have to go through the exercise with an independent audit. And if they comply with the requirements, they can be certified. What do you think offers, what do you think is more expensive, a certification to a national standard or certification to an international standard? Who is thinking the national standard certification is more expensive for a company? And who thinks the international? And again, it depends. It depends on how this certification will be structured. Who will be the auditors and who will be the entities who in the end can certify that an entity is in compliance? And again, I think from what we've heard from the independent experts, a national standard has a different purpose compared to an international standard. A national standard can really facilitate the national process that parks move in the same direction, become more sustainable. But you run the risk, if you have 5 different national standards and they're not all following the same approach, then how do you compare a park which is certified to be gold class in Indonesia to a park which is certified to be bronze class in Colombia? So this is where, if you want to have an international benchmarking and something which shows really offers an international comparison of the performance of industrial parks against a commonly agreed benchmark, this is the role of an international standard. And that's why we really strongly pursue this idea that we will jointly develop an international standard, because this allows then to make parks across the globe to be comparable one to each other, that we can really assess their performance. And it's going to be a really interesting exercise which lies ahead for us for the next year. And we'll be very happy to report the outcomes our next conference will be in 2 years, and by then we should have this international standard and should be able to report on first steps in its implementation. So this was just really a little bit to pick your brains. Now, it's your time, questions and answers. Whom of the panelists would you like to grill? Whom would you like to ask additional questions?
Christian, there's a couple of things in terms of standards and even what was done in Colombia. We've also got legislative frameworks here that manage how we run our special economic zones and industrial parks. The complexity I see is not in the standard. I think it's in when you do the reporting element of that standard, what is it that you will be reporting? What compliance in the reporting will you be seeking? Because now we've got CBAM and we've got nationally contributions, Durban contributions. All of those things will become part of SOPs more than the standard. Or you will become process that you will have to follow to get to the standard. Maybe just a broad comment, and I don't know if SECO is still here, but when I was in the South African National Defence Force, we implemented an ISO 14000 based environmental management system in the military. But we didn't go for certification because we didn't need it for the military, except for one base, which we marketed internationally. So I think if an international standard is there, it's better than having a national standard. You can still aspire to it, but you don't need certification if you don't feel it's necessary for your specific business. Instead of doing a national standard and, I don't know, the longer term, I think, exposure to international markets and so on is going to be limited with what you can achieve with a national standard. Just maybe my opinion. I don't know, Barend, maybe I should point it at you.
And it's fully supported what you've said. And if there is an international standard, it's always going to be a voluntary standard. So it's just, we need to have a standard, and then those parks who are willing to become certified, they can go the extra mile to go through this process. The international standard can still inform the work to make parks more sustainable, environmentally friendlier, socially more inclusive, even if they don't seek certification. But what we have seen, we have received requests from park management entities. They want to get a confirmation, a recognition that they've moved from 62% compliance with the international framework to 84%. And we could not issue it. We could not do it. We can do these EIP assessments with them. We can issue a certificate that they've been working under this UNIDO Global Eco-Industrial Park program, but we cannot tell them, we cannot certify their performance. And I think this is, once we have the international, so far we have been using the international framework to guide this work from industrial park to eco-industrial park. And if there is an international standard in place, it will replace this international framework. It's the logical next steps, like we had version 1, version 2, and now we'll have the international standard. And it can still be used by whoever wants to use it as a reference document to improve the performance of the park. And those who are willing to bear the extra costs, go the extra mile, and those who see a business opportunity buying certified, they can go for the certification. But the beauty is then that an East London industrial development zone can be exactly compared to deep sea in Vietnam, and they can see who has a better performance. And in the end of the day, it might also help them to attract investors. And this, we talk about responsible investors, investors for whom it's important to be located, to produce in an industrial park which is environmentally friendly, socially inclusive. And this is where the best park management entities we are collaborating with also see the value of an international standard and want to become certified against it. So this is a little bit of philosophy. It's a very philosophical topic anyhow, apart from all the technical difficulties you have to overcome. But this is a little bit our thinking. Any more questions? Please.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, how we can bring in the buyers in this EIP certification process, because different buyers require different certifications. So I think it would be great, if we could avoid duplication of requirements. So some buyers require ISO 14, others SIG, FME. There are a number of certifications out there. So companies within industrial parks are required to certify themselves with those different requirements. So I think it's important to bring this into the picture and avoid this duplication of certifications. And then the other thing, when we talk about the eco-industrial park framework, so I think industrial parks should be considered from the site selection. So sometimes, industrial parks are located where the sites have significant environmental and other issues. And then when we talk about, just transition, then it will be very costly and difficult to manage. So I think it's important to start from the early process. I mean, like from the site selection step.
Agreed. Again, agreed, fully agreed. It's to address the question of which standard do you want to become certified to? And as you rightly mentioned, it depends on the clients. But we don't speak about the certification of an individual company or an individual building. It's quite easy for one company to say, I want to become certified to ISO 14000 or ISO 9000 because my clients ask for this. But what makes an industrial park, an eco-industrial park, is the cooperation between park management entity and the tenant companies. And this is also the level where a certification of an eco-industrial park needs to happen. So if the park management entity does not engage with its tenant companies and works on sustainability issues, it will not be possible to become certified because then one of the key elements is missing. We spoke about industrial symbiosis, industrial synergy. The park management entity has a catalytic role in promoting such approaches. The best example we know is the Kalundborg Industrial Park in Denmark. And there the captains of the industry got together in the 70s over, well, some good drinks and some good smokes and decided it was more a collaborative effort. And now they have, I think, over 100 industrial synergies and symbioses which really saved them money. So it was initially not even perceived as a business opportunity. And this has happened. And this is also then what drives an individual company to be certified against ISO 9000, ISO 14000, because the market demands for it. And those park management entities who see an added value, a marketing opportunity to place them in the market, in the national market, to attract good tenant companies, they want to be certified against an upcoming eco-industrial park standard because they can demonstrate, well, our park does not only offer good site, it offers all these additional elements. And to come back to the second aspect of your question, that existing parks might have been developed in unfavorable locations. This is a sad reality we have to deal with. But if you then want to become certified, you will have to make an extra effort, or you will say, for me, it's not interesting. We cannot say because we have some outliers who have been developed in environmentally challenging situations, not taking into environmental issues into consideration, that the standard must be set low, because then the standard loses its value. And it's then still a management decision. It's if you have a product which faces additional concurrence in the market, you can decide, do I want to invest more to make it more attractive, or do I want to phase out, or do I say this market is not interesting for me, I don't produce for the European Union because it's too complex to fulfill all these requirements. So this is a little bit, again, the philosophy behind this EIP standard for eco-industrial parks. Well,
if I may I add a little bit? I know the time is running, but these are very important questions, and fully agree that we have to, we have to try as much as possible to integrate or maybe avoid the duplication. But we're in the process of integrating these ISO sort of standards, and we're thinking how to best integrate those standards and requirements. So stay tuned. That's the first question, answer to the first question. And the second question is definitely the greenfield industrial parks need to also apply, if they want to be certified as EIPs, they need to apply that EIP standards, international EIP standards. And the location and site planning, master planning, all these aspects need to be considered in the stage of the development. And we're also trying to integrate that, how to make sure that greenfield EIPs can also get certified as EIP. So we're considering that, and these are two very important philosophical points, as Christian mentioned. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nayun, for this clarification, because I think it's really an interesting process. Our Global Eco-Industrial Park program works on facilitating the transition of existing industrial parks towards eco-industrial parks. And so far, UNIDO is not a donor organization. We operate with money from Switzerland. because Switzerland also sees a benefit, the Swiss State Secretary for Economic Affairs, in facilitating this transition. A standard, an EIP standard, will then also be applicable for greenfield parks, for newly to be developed parks. And I think this is also why the cooperation with our friends from World Bank and IFC becomes so important. Because if we have criteria a park has to comply with, a newly to be developed park, to become an eco-industrial park, it might also facilitate access to finance for the establishment of such a park. And yes, all these aspects like siting, the master plan development, all this has the requirements of an eco-industrial park into due consideration if we speak about a greenfield park. And we all know it, if you renovate a house, sometimes it can become much more expensive than to build a house afresh. So this is also where the possibility to include greenfield parks will offer additional traction. But still, we also need to support the existing parks to move on to become better performing in the environmental domain, in the social domain, in the park management performance, and in the financial performance. So this is, I think, it's the beauty of bringing greenfield and brownfield together, and it is a challenge, and we're looking forward to master this challenge together, the three organizations. And I think it will be in 2 years from now, a year from now, we'll be very happy to report on how we could overcome this challenge. And we will be happy to share this with you in 2 years in the next Eco-Industrial Park Conference. With this, I would like to thank our panelists. Nayun, sorry for the glitches once more. Bernd, Angelika, thank you for sharing perspectives from the global scene, from South Africa and from Colombia. Give them a big hand, please.
Seeing as you are a bit behind, and you are all to blame because you enjoyed the food too much. Okay, and there's still a mystery prize giveaway. I'm not going to say what that is. I saw some people doze off, so you're not eligible. Okay, please, there is still tea and coffee outside. Let's have a quick break. Okay, so we can finish this quickly, and I don't want to, put all of you under pressure. Some of you need to catch flights. The shuttles to the hotel leave at 5:15, so we have a hard stop here, okay? So I don't want to put that pressure on our next speakers in the last session, unfortunately. Please, can we make it 10 minutes? Is it possible? Please, let's try and be back in here in 10 minutes. Okay, thank you.